Welcome to the Prophecy Club. We've been discussing oil in Israel, and we're going to continue talking about that, trying to answer the question today, is there oil in Israel? Now, Hayseed Stevens believed that he had found 17 scriptures in the Bible, and of course he is a pastor, whereas I'm a prophecy student. I believe that I have now found at least 30, maybe more, but 30 verses in the Bible that say, essentially, that in the last days, there will be massive amounts of oil discovered in Israel. We're going to start today with Jeremiah 33. I already covered a lot of those verses, and I'm not going to try to cover all 30 of them. I'm just going to cover, well, the parts I feel like we need to cover. Jeremiah 33, verse 7 says, "And I will cause the captivity." Now, if you look up that word captivity, it's not talking about like being overthrown or being put in jail or something like that. It's talking about as in a gathering of wealth. So it means wealth. In other words, I will cause the captivity or wealth of Judah. Now that's the southern kingdom. And the captivity or the wealth of Israel, that's the northern kingdom. So this will happen in a time when Judah and Israel are both one sticks. And I believe that that has already happened right now. Many of the Israelis have already returned to Israel, and there will be a whole lot more. So let me start again. I'll put in my words here. I will cause the wealth of Judah and the wealth of Israel to return, and will build them as at the first. What does it mean, as at the first? Well, if you look back into Israel's history, there's been many times, like, for example, in the days of Solomon, when Israel was actually quite wealthy. Matter of fact, the wealthiest nation on earth, at least once in the days of Solomon, if not other times too. Verse 8, "And I will cleanse them from all their iniquity, whereby they have sinned against me, and I will pardon all their iniquities, whereby they have sinned, and whereby they have transgressed against me." Notice, I know a lot of people think that the Jews are going to turn to Jesus. I don't think so. I don't think they return to Jesus until just in the closing hours before Jesus is returned. And a matter of fact, I just made a brand new DVD, and I talk about that in Joel verse by verse. You might want to call up and get that DVD. Let's put it this way. I gave it in front of the Topeka Spirit of Prophecy Church, and there was a lot of praise. People really liked it. I think you'll really understand the last days a whole lot more if you get Joel verse by verse. Anyway, it's essentially saying that wealth returns to Israel because God supernaturally cleans them up. Jeremiah 50, verse 20 says it this way, "In those days and in that time, saith the Lord, the iniquity of Israel shall be sought for, and there shall be none, and the sins of Judah, and they shall not be found, for I will pardon them whom I reserve." In other words, there's a time when Israel is going to be washed clean and raised up and blessed financially. Now let's go on to the next verse, Jeremiah 33:9. "And it shall be to me a name of joy, a praise and an honor before all the nations of the earth, which shall hear all the good that I do unto them." Now, there's more to that verse, but let's back up and just understand what it's saying here so far. It's going to be God's pleasure. It's His joy. And it's going to cause a praise and honor from Israel to Him. Matter of fact, if there is anything that turns many of the, I don't think it's going to be all of them, but many of the Jews to Israel, it will be associated with the discovery of massive amounts of oil in Israel. There's many scriptures. As I go through the 30 scriptures talking about oil in Israel, many of them are referring to how the nation turns back to God as a result of getting the milk and honey. Now let's continue. "And it shall be to me a name of joy, a praise and an honor before all the nations of the earth." In other words, God is going to want to do this, and it's going to bring Him praise and honor before all the nations of the earth. In other words, this is going to cause all the nations of the earth to say, "Wow, look at how God has blessed Israel." Well, has that happened so far? No. Has that happened with the gas discoveries off the coast of Haifa, Israel? No. Okay, so there's still more coming, brothers and sisters. There's still more coming. "A praise and an honor before all the nations of the earth, which shall hear of all the good that I do unto them. And they shall," look at this, "fear and tremble for all the goodness and for all the prosperity that I procure unto it. In other words, for all of the goodness and for all the prosperity that I give to Israel. So Jeremiah 33:9, if there is a verse in the Bible that you just can't not get away from that says God is going to bless Israel, it's got to be Jeremiah 33:9. Let's read it again. Really important. It will be to me a name of joy. In other words, he's going to have a lot of joy, and he's going to get praise and honor before all the nations of the earth, and all the nations of the earth will hear of how he has blessed Israel, and they will begin to fear and tremble for all of the goodness and prosperity he gives to Israel. Now, I know there's a lot of folks that think some of those scriptures talking about, oh, I was talking about olive oil. Okay, I got a question for you. Do you think olive oil is going to cause all of the nations of the earth to fear and tremble Israel? For Israel? Do you think olive oil is going to make all of the nations fear and tremble for the goodness and for the prosperity? Can you imagine all of the nations around Israel saying, oh, please give us of your olive oil. You have so much and such wonderful olive oil. Oh, we're so afraid of you. We just tremble because of your wonderful olive oil. You got to be kidding. No. Brothers and sisters, common sense tells you it's talking about crude oil. Now let's go on to verse 11. For I will cause to return the wealth. Now the word in the Greek here, let me back up. For I will cause to return the captivity of the land as at the first, saith the Lord. Now that's 3 times he's referred. Of course, the captivity means wealth. For I will cause to return the wealth to Israel as they used to be in their heyday, or at the apex, or at the height of their wealth. And of course, in the days of Solomon, they were the wealthiest nation on earth. Okay, I mean, all of the nations gave to Solomon, gave to Israel. Verse 14, behold, the days come, saith the Lord, that I will perform that good thing which I have promised unto the house of Israel and unto the house of Judah. Once again, it's referring to it happens in a time when they're back in their land and the two sticks have come together. So it couldn't have happened prior to 1948. Couldn't have happened. Okay, now, what's it saying about here? That good thing that I have promised. What is that good thing that Israel has been promised? Well, go to Exodus 3:8. You remember Moses standing in front of the burning bush. God told him, take off your shoes because you're standing on holy ground. He said, get you up. I'm going to send you into land flowing with milk and honey. In other words, he's saying, look, guys, I will give you the promised milk and honey. I will do that. I will perform that good thing which I have promised. Israel will get the milk and honey, which I believe is yellow-colored crude oil. I think that's what he's referring to when he's talking about honey. And probably it's talking about gas. Probably milk and honey is gas and oil. Now, let me explain that a minute. Back in the early 70s, a man by the name of Andy Sorrell went over and drilled several wells in Israel. One of them he drilled down to 2,738 feet, I believe is the correct depth, the deepest well ever drilled in Israel. And he found yellow crude oil. He said it looked just like honey. Very interesting. He drilled another well, and he had a light showing of gas, but he said it was coming out of sand that is white as table salt. He said it was as white as table salt. So gas coming out of white table salt could be the milk, and the yellow crude oil could be the honey. Now, I have a bottle of yellow crude oil sitting here on my desk. As a matter of fact, if you'll call in and order these 3 DVDs, we're going to give you a little sample of yellow crude oil. We'll toss it in free. I think you get all 3 DVDs for a gift of $25. We'll toss in a little 1-ounce sample of yellow crude oil. You can open it up. You can smell it. You can, and you'll say, well, it sure looks like honey. But it is not honey, and it is not gasoline. You can smell gasoline in it. You can smell diesel. You can smell kerosene. All of those are all in that yellow crude oil. But it is crude oil. It's not black crude oil. Now, we'll come to the different colors in crude oil here in just a minute. Let's get back on the topic here. Okay, so probably the milk is referring to gas, and the honey is referring to yellow crude oil. Now, Let's go to Deuteronomy 32:13. And he made him to ride upon the high places of the earth, that he might eat the increase of the fields. Here's where you have to have the DVD to be able to show where I've circled these different words here, because I'm going to move on through these here real quickly. And if you had the DVD, you could see what I was trying to talk about. I've got here one page in the presentation that has 25 of the 30 prophecies all on one page. And I've highlighted many of the words that are similar. In other words, milk is a similar word, Joseph, deep, fatness. I've highlighted those words, and if you were to put all of those words together in 3 sentences to summarize what 25 of the 30 scriptures about oil in Israel are saying, essentially, this is what God is saying. In the last days, I will give Israel the hidden treasures of yellow crude oil sucked from rock deep in the land. I will cause the nations of the earth to fear and tremble because of all of the wealth, the milk and honey promised to Moses that I give to Israel. With it, I will build the waste cities, making Israel the glory of all lands, the best of all lands on earth, returning Israel to her former state of wealth and prosperity. Okay, now let's go to Ezekiel 20, verse 6. And it says, In the day that I lifted up mine hand unto them, talking about Israel, to bring them forth of the land of Egypt into a land that I espied for them, flowing with milk and honey, which is the glory of all lands. Now, the thing I think is so interesting and telling about this verse is it's saying that part of the promise to take Israel from the land of Egypt into Israel, into a land that is flowing with milk and honey, part of that promise is saying that it's the glory of all lands, or the best land on earth. In other words, flowing with milk and honey is associated with Israel being the best land, meaning that what makes Israel the best land on earth, it is the milk and honey. Then if we move down just a few verses to verse 15, it says, Yet also I lifted up my hand unto them in the wilderness, that I would not bring them into the land which I had given them, flowing with milk and honey, which is the glory of all lands. So we have 2 verses that is associating milk and honey with them being the best land on earth. And in my opinion, that's really saying that what makes Israel the best land on earth is the milk and honey. And of course, we've already discussed the milk and honey is probably referring to gas and oil. We'll be right back after this message. If you would like to find out more about our vision to find oil in Israel, call 877-645-4772. That's 877-OIL-ISRAEL or 877-645-4772. That's 877-OIL-ISRAEL or 877-645-4772. There's no obligation. They'll send you out a free packet explaining our vision. Karen Anderson spent 10 hours a day for 10 years, 5 hours a day for 20 years, learning the secrets of Revelation from an astronomical point of view. None of the wicked shall understand, but the wise shall understand, says the Bible. She says the book of Revelation is a call for the tribes of Israel to return by explaining the story of the Son of Man coming from one end of heaven to the other. By understanding Jesus' role in the heaven, it helps us fulfill our role on the earth. Many men have tried to read this message, but it is hidden until the appropriate time. The stars are a second witness to the Bible, designed to be understood now. A letter from God to us to prove Jesus is the Messiah. Explaining this story called The Word of God and Jesus is the Word. Topics are the purpose of the earth, Bullinger's Witness of the Stars and Clarence Larkin, the wedding feast, the offerings of the temple and the man, the sickles of Revelation 14:14, the Great Seal and its secret purpose, the Great Pyramid and its role in early Christianity. 5 DVDs, almost 10 hours, valued at $150, all for a gift of just $50 or more. It's the astronomical book of Revelation. Call 785-266-1112. 5 DVDs, 10 hours, astronomical book of Revelation. Gift of $50 or more, 785-266-1112. And now, back to the program. The milk and honey is probably referring to gas and oil. Now let's jump over to Ezekiel 36:6. I think one of the most powerful verses. It says, "Prophesy, therefore, concerning the land of Israel." Okay, here's what it's saying. I'm about to speak to the future of Israel. I'm about to tell you what is coming in the future of Israel. "And say unto the mountains and to the hills, O mountains of Israel, ye shall shoot forth your branches and yield your fruit to my people of Israel, for they are at hand to come. For behold, I am for you, and I will turn unto you, and ye shall be tilled and sown." You won't understand what that verse is saying until you understand the word branches and fruit. Okay, so what is it saying? Shoot forth your branches. So we look up the word branches, and it's talking about a twig. Okay, all right, fine. We understand what that is. And then yield your fruit. You look up fruit, it's talking about fruit. However, it goes on to say, "And I will multiply upon you all the house of Israel, even all of it, and the cities shall be inhabited, and the wastes shall be builded." All right, has that happened? We are seeing the cities now begin to be inhabited again, and the waste places are being built up, but they're not totally where they should, and certainly not where they used to be in the past. "And I will multiply upon you man and beast, and they shall increase and bring fruit. And I will settle you after your old estates." Now that ties into the earlier verse talking about how I will make you better than you used to be. All right, we talked about that. "And will do better unto you than at your beginnings." In other words, the very best days of Israel are yet in the future. Now, Stan, how can you prove that? Well, this is all talking about the last days. It's all talking about oil in Israel, and it certainly hadn't happened before 1948. So this is going to be after 1948. One day, Israel is going to be better than they ever have been in the past. I believe they will emerge World War III the great victor. They'll get back all of the land. We will see millions of Christians and Jews from around the war-torn nations in masses move to Israel. Because at Armageddon, it's the battle against light and darkness, against good and evil, against Jesus and Lucifer. And so it's going to be the good people, the Christians, the people that believe in Jehovah and his son Yahshua Jesus will live in Israel, and all of the rest of the unbelievers will be around the world. And this is the time when all of the world comes down to attack Israel. "I will settle you after your old estates, and will do better to you than at your beginnings, and ye shall know that I am the Lord." Now there again, I've mentioned several times the last couple of broadcasts that it is associated that Israel finding their God is associated with crude oil. "Yea, I will cause men to walk upon you, even my people Israel, and they shall possess thee, and thou shalt be their inheritance, and thou shalt no more henceforth bereave them of men." In other words, once Israel is back in her land, she never is uprooted ever, ever, ever again. So if you want to know who wins World War III, it's got to be Israel. You want to know where the last place to move to is to have safety? It's got to be Israel. Okay, so what does it mean, shoot forth your branches? Well, it definitely means that things are going to grow. No question about that. But could it also mean that you will shoot forth oil out of the land, and that's what causes your waste places to be builded, and that's what brings the finances to move many people to Israel? I can see it. Now, this next point is very important. It's not scripture, but there is two schools of thought out there on how oil is actually created. Some people believe that is pre-flood plants and animals, but I can dispel that several different ways. The second theory is what is called abiotic theory, and that is that oil is actually created deep within the earth. Now, first, the peak oil theory, or the biotic theory that says it's pre-flood plants and animals. The reason I don't believe that is because if you read Lindsey Williams' book, you discover that at the 1,100-foot level, they ran across pre-flood plants and animals, frozen forest, and things like that. As a matter of fact, he said they brought up a frog about the size of a dinner plate, laid it out there, and he says it started thawing out and started coming back to life, and they threw it out. And they should have probably held on to it because the frog may have been a pre-flood frog, and that would have made it about 4,500 years old. A 4,500-year-old frog, that would be interesting. All right, then down at the 1,700-foot level, they found crude oil. Well, that's two different levels. In other words, it's saying that crude oil did not come from pre-flood plants and animals. In the fact that this was frozen forest, it would not have allowed it to ever turn to crude oil if it was decayed pre-flood plants and animals. The second reason is they have calculated, people with minds a lot sharper than mine, have calculated that if pre-flood plants and animals is where crude oil came from, then we would have run out of crude oil a long time ago. In other words, we've already used up what could be the pre-flood plants and animals. I believe the peak oil theory is the plan that the oil companies use to keep their prices high. In other words, they want to say, oh, we're running out of oil. But I know that not to be true, because for a few months I ran across a situation where I was trying to help someone sell some crude oil. I mean, a large tanker full of crude oil. In the process, I called almost every one of the 150 oil refineries in America. I have talked to the top people there, and I have tried to sell oil with all of my sales experience and background. I used to be a sales course instructor. But I could not find one refinery that needed any crude oil. As a matter of fact, their attitude was, there's the kneeling board, boy, if you want to sell oil to me, stand in line and then come in and get on your knees and beg me, and don't slobber on my table or I'm not going to talk to you. But trust me, there is not an oil refinery in America that has any shortage of oil. In other words, there's actually an oil glut all around the nation. Now let's go to another reason I believe that there's oil in Israel. In Daniel chapter 11, verse 21, and this is describing when the Antichrist goes in, and this has to do with him sitting on the Ark of the Covenant, declaring he is God, stopping animal sacrifice, committing the abomination that causes desolation, setting up the image, and the image speaks and causes everyone to receive the mark of the beast or they can't buy or sell, okay? In that same visit, I believe these prophecies are fulfilled. It says, Daniel 11:21, and in his estate shall stand up a vile person, that's the Antichrist, to whom they shall not give the honor of the kingdom, but he shall come in peaceably and obtain the kingdom by flatteries. So the Antichrist gets his power, seat, and authority, not by conquest, but by flatteries. Skip down to verse 24. And he shall enter peaceably even upon the fattest places of the province. And he shall do that which his fathers have not done, nor his fathers' fathers. He shall scatter among them the prey, the spoil, and the riches. Question is, what does that word fattest mean? Well, how I found this was searching through the word that has to do with crude oil. And that, just like in Genesis 27, when Isaac was prophesying to Jacob, and he says, that dwelling shall be the fat of the earth. And then when he prophesied to Esau, your dwelling will be the fattest places of the province, the same thing. This is the same word, fattest there. He shall enter peaceably upon the fattest places of the province. Now, I believe the way we would say this today, he's going to go down and visit the world's largest oil field in Israel. Then what does he do when he sees all of this massive wealth that now is at his hands? And he shall do that which his fathers have not done, nor his fathers' fathers. He shall scatter among them the prey and spoil and riches. In other words, he's going to spread around the wealth that he gathers in the middle of the tribulation when he sits on the Ark of the Covenant. He has been given power and authority for 1,260 days, or time times the dividing of time, or 3.5 years, however you want to divide that up. And then if you skip down to verse 41, it says, and he, referring to the Antichrist, shall enter into the glorious land. So I believe that this is saying that, yes, there is going to be a massive oil field in Israel. Stan, why do you think that oil is what causes the Battle of Armageddon? Here it is, Joel 3:1. For behold, in those days and in that time, when I shall bring again the captivity, that means wealth, of Judah and Jerusalem, I will also gather all nations and will bring them down into the valley of Jehoshaphat, and will plead with them there for my people and for my heritage Israel, whom they have scattered among the nations and parted my land. Two things that's saying: that yes, they will give the Palestinians a state. It's also saying that in a time when Israel has gathered their wealth again, Israel, Judah, and Jerusalem has become wealthy again. In those days, he's going to gather all nations down against Israel. And the other scripture says that even though the whole world were together against Israel, they will not be victorious, because Jesus returns and sees to it that Israel is victorious. Now let's go to Isaiah 60. Then shalt thou see and flow together, and thine heart shall fear and be enlarged, because the abundance of the sea shall be converted unto thee. The forces of the Gentiles shall come into thee. Wow, a whole lot is said into that verse if you understand it. So let's dissect it a little bit. Then thou shalt see and flow together. In other words, then Israel and the outcasts shall be gathered back into Israel. Thine heart shall fear and be enlarged. When it says enlarged, doesn't mean you have an enlarged heart, you got heart problems. It means you're going to be very glad. When it says your heart shall fear, I believe it's referring to then you will have fear toward Jehovah your God, and will be enlarged, because the abundance of the sea shall be converted to thee. Now, a lot of people thought that it might be the Dead Sea. And of course, there is a lot of wealth, the mineral wealth, in the waters of the Dead Sea. However, I think it's something else. The reason is because about 50 miles off of the coast of Haifa, Israel, there has been now 3 massive gas fields discovered. So the abundance of the sea is now being converted unto Israel. The next part of the verse says the forces, and that forces means wealth. The wealth of the Gentiles shall come unto thee. Why does the wealth of the Gentiles come unto thee? Well, I think it's because Israel makes a massive gas and oil discovery, and I suspect that when that discovery happens and they start pumping that gas, pumping that oil out, then the oil wells of the surrounding nations will begin to go dry. Why do you say that? Well, Hayseed, my good friend, said that he had analyzed the DNA of the oil of Israel and also the surrounding nations. And he said it's all the same DNA, because he says just like people have DNA, oil has DNA. And he said you can tell if it's coming from the same source. And he said all of the source oil of the Middle East is actually all the same source. And he believes that it would be in Israel. Now let's jump to Deuteronomy 33:19. About the same verse, about the same prophecies. Now, the reason it's important to have it twice is because in the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, let a thing be established. If you find something in one verse, now from the Prophecy Club, some exciting opportunities for you. If you would like to find out more about our vision to find oil in Israel, call 877-645-4772. That's 877-OIL-ISRAEL or 877-645-4772. That's 877-OIL-ISRAEL or 877-645-4772. There's no obligation. They'll send you out a free packet explaining our vision. The Prophecy Club Summer Newsletter is now available for download at prophecyclub.com, or you can call 785-266-1112 and we'll mail it to you free for our free newsletter. Nothing I'm saying in this program should be deemed an offering or a solicitation for you to buy a security. Any such thing can only be done through a proper legal prospectus, such as a private placement document approved by the company. My statements are my personal views and opinions, and they are not a legal representation or a promise. I cannot promise I know the exact location of oil in Israel, nor that I will ever drill for or find oil in Israel. This interview is for entertainment purposes only. Any legal relationship, which would include a business relationship or an investment, will only be done through proper legal documents. Thank you for understanding. Stan Johnson.